Okay, I think we can call the meeting to
Hi,
order.
this is John Forbes. I'm on a different phone. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I was on my cell phone, and this is just a better phone.
Okay.
Is everyone on?
We have Cindy, Russ. Carolyn, Deborah, Diane, me, 2.
Jeff Cooley is here.
Jeff Cooley, good.
Do we have a quorum?
John Noyce is here.
And John Noyes, good. So we have a quorum.
Okay, and what about, do we have a sufficient number of members, of voting members?
Yes.
Okay. Shall we call the meeting to order?
That sounds good.
Would you like to discuss approval of the minutes? Martha?
Yes, we need to discuss the September minutes and the October minutes. The September minutes were postponed to October and then to November.
I wonder if we could, Martha,
Yes.
hold the September minutes until we come to the agenda item about the First Congregational Church, because my comments or questions about the September minutes relate to that, and there's a little bit of background we should discuss.
We can do that. So do we just want to consider the October minutes for now?
Why don't we do that?
Okay. Were there any comments on the October minutes? Do we have a motion to approve?
A motion
So move.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Is there any, are we finished with that, the minutes, Martha?
I think we lost your audio.
Have we still lost our audio?
I'm not hearing anything that Martha's saying.
I'm not either, Jean.
I'm not either.
Yeah. Tell her to
Mhm.
hear you.
Well, let me ask this question. While Martha's sorting it out, do we want to go down to the Lafayette Trail marker and then come back up and pick up, or I guess, I'm sorry, Ferry Road sidewalk is the first one. But Martha needs to be here for that since she's had the discussions for Wade Thomas. Perhaps we can go to the Lafayette Trail marker?
Martha wrote up our thoughts on that. We might, Martha. Would you agree, Cindy? Can't hear Cindy either. Okay.
So Cindy's off too?
No, I'm
Yeah.
on.
Okay.
Hi, Cindy.
Hi, no, my microphone was muted, that's all.
Okay.
Cindy, do we feel like we can go ahead without Martha, or should we wait for Martha because she wrote up our thoughts?
Looking
Go
at
ahead,
the,
Brenda.
looking
Why
at
don't you go
this,
ahead and do it?
looking at the symbols, it seems as though Martha's the only one who's muted. She just needs to hit unmute.
I don't have her telephone number. Otherwise, I would try that way if she was using a different phone. But why don't we go ahead? Why don't we go ahead with the discussion on the Lafayette Trail marker, and then because
Okay.
we know Martha's thoughts and Cynthia and Deanie were part of the team.
All
Okay,
right.
I'm dialed in with my phone now. Can you hear me?
Okay. Hi.
Yes.
Hi. Okay. Not sure what
So,
happened with my computer, but
Why don't we then go to the public open forum or your plaque program discussion, Martha?
okay. So I requested a copy of the historic survey from the selectman's office, and they're getting that together.
Oh, good.
They didn't know where it was right at the moment, but I'm sure there's a digital copy somewhere. So I'll be able to send that out to people.
That would be great. Excellent.
Yep. And then the Ferry Road sidewalk replacement is the next thing on the agenda.
Can we stay back on the plaque program? Have
Sure.
you had a chance to do anything relative to 1 Lime Street and the question of the date?
No, we have the research that we have on that is a little bit sketchy. I did not do that research. So the date that we have on that house is 1700. And I know Marty has a plaque that she got from a governor at some point that said it was a different date. But I'm not sure what the background is on that. I think she might have an earlier date for
when
that.
you have a chance, Martha, can you possibly do your normal kind of research to clarify this? I don't
I'll
think
see
we
what
ought
I can
to.
come up.
Okay, and let me just set the guidelines. I don't think if we have an official plaque from the governor, that should not impede us wanting to come up with the best estimate we can in terms of the date.
Yeah, that's why she's questioning it, because the date she got from the governor was different than what we found in the land records. So
Right.
We'll try to figure that out.
Okay, thank you very much.
Where were the land records? Was that earlier or later, Martha?
The land records came up with 1700, and I think she has a 1600 date.
Oh, big difference.
It can't
Mhm.
possibly be 16.
Like not 1600, but the 16 something date.
Yeah.
Carolyn knows more about it than I do.
1600.
About what would be realistic for that.
Okay.
So there are definitely some questions as to the accuracy of those dates.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Then you're ready to go to the next item.
So, and you said you wanted to go to the Lafayette Trail marker?
No, we went there
Or-
because you had the information on the Ferry Road.
Okay, okay. So for Ferry Road, Mr. Thomas attended the tree commission meeting, and there was a lengthy discussion about the sidewalk and the trees and the impact that doing the sidewalk project would have on the trees. There were several mature maple trees that would be severely impacted. The problem is that when they have to dig down and replace the sidewalk, they're going down 14 to 16 inches, and they would be cutting through the majority of the roots of those trees, and the tree warden does not think that there's any way to protect the roots and do the sidewalk. He thinks, you might have some success in the short term, but long term, those trees are going to die, and the town will be spending a lot of money pruning, fertilizing, and trying to save them, only to end up removing them in the end anyway.
And also,
So the tree commission,
falling and hitting the house. Also, I would think potentially having the tree fall and create property damage would also be part of the town's responsibility if the town, if the town builds the sidewalk and compromises the roots. Anyway.
right. That was one of the things that he said. Yeah. So he would rather remove the trees, do the sidewalk, and then plant new trees. There is room in the budget to plant at least 6 trees, and Mr. Thomas is meeting with a landscape architect on the 7th of November to discuss if there's anything else that can be done. The tree commission is very committed to saving the trees if at all possible. And if the trees need to be removed, there will be a public hearing about that so that all of the neighbors and everybody can weigh in on it. So that's where that stands right now.
Okay. At the discussion, was there any discussion about the idea that Tim Griswold brought up? Is when you approach the trees, you make the sidewalk kind of goes around in a circular fashion and continues, like they did outside at the Lyme Use Services Bureau.
Right. So the tree that they did that with is a rather small weeping cherry tree. And what they did was they skirted around the drip line of the tree because that's where the tree roots go out to the drip line. So these trees that we're talking about on Ferry Road, the maple trees, have a very extensive root system and basically a huge drip line.
Okay.
So Mr. Degnan did not think that that would work very well for those trees. Mr. Thomas, Wade Thomas, is willing to do absolutely anything that the Historic District Commission wants or the Tree Commission wants. So they're still looking into that, about whether that, skirting around some of the roots would work. And I think that's one of the things that he is going to discuss with the landscape architect.
Now, was there any discussion, was there anything brought up in the meeting that said you keep the sidewalk, the old sidewalk, just right over the roots, so you're not disturbing the roots, and you put a new sidewalk, a 3-foot new sidewalk in elsewhere?
They talked about that. They talked about changing the material and using a permeable material to go over the roots.
Right.
They talked about a lot of different things. And Mr. Thomas is looking into all of that.
Okay. So you think it was a very good, useful discussion?
Yes,
Okay.
it definitely was. And he, I think, is going to go back to the tree commission meeting in a couple of weeks. They're having a meeting, I think, on November 19th. It's the third Thursday. And they'll be discussing more about the sidewalk and the trees, and if there needs to be a material change or if they can skirt around it. That's what they'll be discussing.
Okay. Are there any other comments from other members of our team?
This is Jeff. From my standpoint, it seems to me the proper sidewalk is definitely a good thing to do. It's not realistic to save the tree to do that. Depending on the neighbors and all that kind of stuff, it sounds like the tree commission and whole group get those, so new trees can be planted, and with final analysis be a way better solution than the way it is right now. And it would look, and in 10 years, the new trees, which will be more appropriate for that location and for given the sidewalk, will be. So from historic district commission standpoint, it's going to only enhance the attractiveness of the area. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one
One of the
advantage
things
if they
that-
put in new trees is that they can look at the issue of, do you put the trees between the street and the sidewalk, or do you move the sidewalk over and put the trees on the property side? And in fact, that may, in fact, I mean, I'm just saying that's another option if you decide to use new trees.
Right. A couple of years ago, the tree commission planted a new tree on Ferry Road in between the sidewalk and the road, and they selected a hornbeam, which is well suited to that little strip of land and
Okay.
will
Right.
and is doing quite well. So they know that there are other varieties they can plant. The trees
Okay.
that are there are Norway maples, and they just kind of sprouted up on their own.
Right.
So.
Are there other comments?
Martha, your email of Sunday afternoon indicated we had to make a final decision today. Is that about width of sidewalk, or is that on hold, given that the tree commission's still investigating this issue?
We should make a decision today to allow the project to start to go forward in whatever form it's going to take. We know there will be a sidewalk, and we know there will be trees there somehow. Because we have a 60-day limit for how long we can take to make a decision. We considered it first in October with the public hearing. It would be a good idea to at least wrap it up in some fashion so that the town can move ahead with the project and do what they need to do. We could give it a qualified approval depending on what the tree commission decides to do about the trees. And any change in materials or anything like that could be adjusted in the future. So
I think we should do that.
That would probably be a good thing to do.
Yes.
I think you should do it.
Yes.
With the qualified approval?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
we all agree that we want to have a sidewalk there that's safe for people to walk around. So,
Exactly. As a healthcare provider, I walked on those sidewalks just this weekend, and I was walking with a friend of mine that hasn't walked in that area, and she tripped. So it's very dangerous. So I would say the trees need to go, and a new sidewalk and new trees will just look beautiful there. And it's a matter of public safety.
yep, agreed.
John, would you like to frame a qualified statement for us? As our lawyer?
Off the top of my head, boy, I'm not sure I've had enough coffee. I did have one other question, though. We had some discussion at the last meeting about whether it would be preferable to keep the width at 3 feet. And I think if we're going to have that limit, that should be in the motion. But I'm curious what others think.
Can that be that way, even though we're trying to be ADA compliant? Is there a connection between grant money that will be received and meet requirements?
I don't.
It's a steep grant, so I'm sure that there are ADA requirements in there because it's a government grant, so they'll have everything in there.
This is Jeff. I don't
Supposed to say,
under our worry about whether it's 3 feet or 4 feet. I think it's going to be a nice sidewalk. It's going to be what's either ADA compliant or whatever. And honestly, the wider the better for people to walk dogs and be able to pass each other and so on and so forth. So that doesn't strike me as a detail that's worth our being too worried about.
I would agree with Jeff on that.
Well, I guess all I would say if we need approval is that the Historic District Commission approves the construction of a new sidewalk in compliance with terms of the steep grant and in compliance with recommendations of the Tree Commission.
That sounds good.
Okay. Have you captured that, Martha?
So I'm going to write this down and then I'll read it back to you and you can tell me if I got it right.
Okay.
The HDC approves the construction of a new sidewalk on Ferry
I
Road.
guess you should, yeah, on Ferry Road.
Yeah, on Ferry Road. To be in compliance with, can you say that again, John?
I would just say, what did I say? In compliance
The
with
steep grant,
with-
the steep,
with the-
steep grant
in
requirements.
compliance with the terms of the steep grant and in compliance with recommendations of the Tree Commission.
Good. Steep grant. And okay, the HDC approves the construction of a new sidewalk on Ferry Road to be in compliance with the terms of the steep grant and in compliance with recommendations from the Old Lyme Tree Commission. How does that sound?
Perfect.
Good.
I like it.
Do I have a second for that motion?
I second it.
Okay. All in favor?
aye.
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 Okay, great.
Shall we now move to the Lafayette Trail Marker? And
Sounds
Martha, I
good.
think you're on again.
Okay. So, we have two locations that are proposed, two possible locations, which I sent out to everybody with the accompanying in text that Carolyn and John worked on. So the first one is right across from Ferry Road on Lime Street. And you can see how I tried to insert a little picture of the sign there so you could kind of see what it would look like. This is the one that Marty Ames does not like. She does not want this like right by her house. So we have another option, which is this one, which would be right at the corner of McCurdy and Lime Street, across the street. And the text references that General Lafayette stopped for breakfast across the road at Richard McCurdy's house. I sent both of these proposals to Julien, and he thought that they were both fine. He didn't object to either one. He said that he would attend the meeting today, but I don't see him here yet. But in any case, this is what we have. So how do people feel about that?
Martha, we decide we can't force this sign on Marty Ames. We don't want to force it on Marty Ames.
Right, exactly.
So, although we all agree that that's the best place for it, but we don't want to force it on Marty. Therefore,
right.
We wanted to ask Julien if the Pomeroy Foundation would consider having us approve the sign, take the sign, and then install the sign after Marty Ames has sold her house. Was that not one of our choices?
That we discussed that. He wanted to nail down the location and the installation right away and have it be a done deal, basically, without having to consider whether the next owner will like the location or not.
Okay. Okay.
How about the location of, I guess it's the town green, where the stone benches? Was that ever considered fully? Only because the placement near to this driveway, I have seen those pillars, and you probably have too, be knocked over. The pillars are backing into that driveway on the side of the church. I'm concerned that sign would be taken out because there's a lot of accidents on that corner, and numerous of those pillars have been taken out in front of the church and on the side there.
One of the reasons, Deb, that we did consider having it closer, more closer to the bench, but when you are coming towards the green, it's kind of an obstruction of the green. In other words, it's a beautiful view shed to look at the green and then back at the Luddington house. And with the sign right there, it kind of obstructs that that vista, so to speak. That's why we thought it would be nicer to tuck it in a little bit into that corner.
Okay.
That's why we made that choice. So to explain that, yeah.
I agree with Deanie. I think that it's better tucked in, as she recommends, and that the risk from traffic in and out of the driveway is fairly minimal, not enough to make us move the sign to another location on the green. And one other question, you all know that I'm new to this. What would there be any advantage to showing the two very nice images that Martha created to Marty Ames and let her see what it would actually look like and let her see what the alternative is to see if she would in any way, reshape, rethink her decision, her opposition.
No.
That's
The other thing is, let
You're
me say this. Am I correct, Martha, that this would actually not be on Marty Ames' property, but will be on Old Lyme property?
It wouldn't be on her property. It would be on the Old Lyme right-of-way, the town of Old Lyme's right-of-way, between the sidewalk and the road, sort of on the edge.
Yeah.
She still
Her
doesn't.
objection was pretty strong.
Yeah.
But it would
Yeah,
be,
Deanie
let me
and,
say, even with this, I like the idea of discussing it with her because I think she always feels like that people like these boards and commissions are picking on her.
Right.
We had a cocktail with her the other night and she was mumbling about problems in Old Lyme, but so she's loaded for bear.
Yeah. I don't think she's going to like it anymore if it's in the strip between the sidewalk and the street. She's
Yeah,
good.
but I just think it would be nice to just to introduce it to her and let her say no. And so she can't say that we weren't consulting with her. That's all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It would just be a nice
Right.
gesture. And, this may be not with a group. I mean, it could be, Cynthia, if you would agree, because you've got a good relationship with Marty, of just going down and talking to her and showing her.
All right, I'll try it again. Yep.
You could bring,
Even just to show her the position, the location across the street on the green, just so she knows what to expect. If
Okay.
that's where it goes.
Okay.
Sounds like that's where it'll end up, but.
Let me ask one other question. Let's say that Marty is successful in selling her house. This is not going to go in for what, 2 or 3 years? What was it? 80. He came in 84, so it was the 200th anniversary, or
Mm-hmm,
there was.
mm-hmm.
So that if, let's say, a year from now, someone buys the house, is the plaque actually going to be executed before then, or is it going to be executed afterwards?
That's a good question. I don't know what their time frame is.
Okay. I
can ask him.
I know what the representatives is, because he probably has a contract of a certain time to get everyone signed up. But
I think, didn't he mention something about 24 months or something? Why does that kind of stick in my head?
I agree that I think he's under pressure to get everyone to agree where their signs are going to go. I think he has a contract with the William Pomeroy Foundation to nail this all down. That's why he's saying.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So,
but that doesn't mean that after he's left the scene and there's new ownership, we couldn't go back and see whether there's any flexibility if we thought strongly about moving it across the street.
well, but then it wouldn't say the right thing. I mean, if we fix the wording that's been proposed,
Right.
we can't. Yeah. So, I guess I'd suggest, Cindy, maybe you take one more shot with Marty. I don't expect her to agree, but
I'll do it one more time.
do it. And then we agree to put it across the street and use the wording that Carolyn and John have created.
Okay.
we could.
I have one more thought. Again, I'm new to this and you may have already considered it, but if the sign were in front of Marty's house, in other words, on her property or on the public right-of-way adjoining her property, but in a different location, perhaps less central, so that it doesn't seem right in the middle of the corner. For example, if it were closer to the driveway on the parsonage side, would that make any difference?
That would be worse for her.
That would be worse for her?
Yes.
She'd see more of it.
She would see it from their porch.
Oh, okay.
which is she entertains out on her porch a lot.
Uh-huh.
I think her objection, it seems to me from what I understand, is that her objection is not that she's going to see the sign. Her objection is she doesn't want people thinking that her house is a museum and to come knocking on the door.
Ah,
That's a big part of it, yes.
All right.
I wonder, I have two thoughts. One is we could approve it across the street. And if the house sells and if we decide it's better in front of the house, we could at that time go back to Julian or the foundation and say, you know, if this hasn't been manufactured yet, can we change it? Here's the new wording, here's the new location. I also recall, and I can't find it quickly, that Tim Griswold sent a comment noting some possible complications if this were placed in the strip in front of the house or near the house. Am I recalling that correct?
Yes,
You are.
he talked about cyclists and snowplows.
Mm-hmm.
And those factors might suggest that it's wiser to put it across the street anyway. Excuse me.
and one last thought, not to prolong this, but I hadn't heard Marty's concern that people would come knocking on her door thinking it was a museum. But I would suggest to her that even if the sign is across the street, people still might think that her house is a museum. And anybody who's going to think it's a museum will think that anyway, which is probably a very small number of people. So I'm not sure moving the sign across the street would remove that, what I see as a rather remote.
I'll mention it too.
Let me just ask, Deanie, are people knocking at your door because there's the big boulder with the name of the general on?
When I first moved in here, there were lots of people knocking on the door. They don't anymore.
Right.
But I think initially people still thought it was the post office or something. But it hasn't happened in several years. Yeah.
Are we ready to vote on this?
What would be our vote? That if Marty still continues to disagree, then we would place the sign on the other side of the road, or do we want to check with her one more time before we take a final vote?
Well, all right. If I mean, that's a good idea that we ought to do the checking and then vote on this at our next meeting.
I think that's the best course.
Good. Thank you. I want to thank the team that really have been thinking over this last month in terms of both the wording that you produced and these two excellent sets of photographs. Bravo for the work you've done.
Thank you.
With that, let's go to our next item. Which is the Historic District GIS update with Russ.
Uh-huh.
Hi, everybody. I shared that MapGeo has an arrangement with the town to provide supporting GIS services for our GIS system, and that hopefully you received my email that showed the ability to add a district overlay that would define the historic district on the GIS map system as a layer. The second part of that was the option that the GIS system also has the capability of adding bits of information to objects on the map. So for example, if you were to click on a structure that's within that historic district overlay, there could be an option to provide data or information about that object. So for example, if you were to click on an auxiliary building, it might indicate when the building was made or constructed, or it could indicate the type of the structure or the use, as an example. The next step in order to generate a GIS map or boundary is to confirm and define the historic district boundary and to generate that in a digital format. And to that end, Martha and I have been kind of researching to indicate or to represent the specific district, historic district boundary. And to that end, what we found so far is that the code, the town code, actually has a pretty detailed description of the boundary. And Martha, maybe you could highlight a bit more what your conversation with the folks at the state about the boundary.
Right. So in the ordinance, it states that the boundary extends on either side of Lime Street 300 feet from the center of the street. And, you know, different towns with different historic districts will have different boundaries, but for Old Lyme, it's 300 feet from the center of the street, and it extends from that McCurdy Road all the way up to Rose Lane. It skips over the Peck Tavern, but it does include number 2 Sill Lane for it's kind of an odd reason. But so we know the general boundaries of the historic district, and Mary Dunn is looking into whether the state has anything more specific than that. She's working from home right now, so she would need to go into her office and look that up. But she's definitely working on that, and she will get back to us on that.
Martha and Russ, I was going through some papers here, and I have a copy of the original study that was done and submitted to the state. And so, Russ, probably I'll just drop that off at your house.
That would be great.
I think the ordinance would supersede this, but it would give you exactly what was drafted by the original commission, town commission that put together the proposal for the historic district. And I just discovered the other day when my wife was.
Information in there.
What?
I think there might be some survey information in there too.
Okay.
I think they had to survey it, so that might help with the GIS.
Okay. It's a very nice document. It was produced probably drafted in 69 and has a date on it, either 1970 or 1971, probably 1970. So I'll drop that off.
I have one.
It's the only copy that I know there's other copies, but it's the only one I've been able to. I'm not sure how it ended up in my files.
Could I just say one thing? I don't know whether this is of any concern to anybody, but it just occurred to me that if people's houses pop up, there's lots of information about them on this GIS pop-up or whatever you call it. Does that raise any privacy concerns on the part of anybody, or is this something that's very standard now? I mean, in other words, what Russ was describing, I like the idea of it overall. I like the concept of it, but if we have too much detailed information about each building, then you're actually, that's, might raise some privacy concerns, right? Or no?
What type of information, Deanie, are you saying would pop up?
Well, you were talking about the date of the house and construction and, its current, its former use, current uses, that kind of thing? I mean, does that, I'm only asking the question. I just,
That's all basically on there anyways.
yeah, it probably is.
It's
I
public.
would say this, that on one thing we might, to address Deanie's point, is to look at the write-up that, I mean, there's been several write-ups about buildings on Lime Street, but the most recent one is by the Historic District Society, and I don't think they've received any pushback. Maybe I'm wrong from that, but it's a snapshot of the house and the background and
Yeah.
more information about who built the original house.
Right. It's
But
not, it's
that-
really
that- that's
current,
possible.
not
What?
current information. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I mean it's basically talking about the history of the house.
Yeah. Which is fine, which is what we understand when we live in a historic district.
Dean, I think that's a great point. I think that's why I mentioned that there's two parts to this. So one is that, as Cindy already noted, that on the GIS system right now for each property, there's information. So part one is simply to add the historic district boundary or the overlay, and in that case, there would be no additional provided by the Historic District Commission or anything like that on any of the specific structures. I think the part two is the option if we would like to have some historic or some designation about a particular structure that is historic in nature, there's the opportunity to add that when you're in that historic district overlay theme. And so
Right.
we should think about it in two parts.
Yeah. And I would support that. I just think we have to be very careful about,
Right.
keeping it very general with respect to history and not going to contemporary situations there. Yeah.
I do think that it would be terrific if for each place that we talked about a date or the original builder, that was information we used for Martha's studies for issuing a plaque.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think one of the things we're striving for is accuracy. Although it's difficult when you go back 400 years to get precise accuracy, but you can have order of magnitude accuracy. And if we really if with this, we would become kind of all the news that's fit to print, which the New York Times started in 1913.
I'm sorry, Jim.
So it's good from people looking at Low Lyme or thinking about coming to Low Lyme to know that there's a source of accurate information.
Yeah.
I just want to point out that the three versions that I've seen of the Landmarks of Old Lyme, Connecticut booklet give the history thumbnail of the history. However, it's best understood at the time that booklet was put out. And they also, I think it's in italics, if I'm remembering right, give the name of the current owner. So there is a precedent for that. It doesn't give any details about when the current owner bought it or what they do or nothing about the current use of the house, just simply the name of the owner. And the reason why that's useful going forward is that it's helpful to those of us looking back to know who owned that particular house in a certain year if we want to look up property records. So it has a practical use, but I don't know if you would consider it an invasion of privacy to have the current names on this available on this or not.
Well, all that information is on the GIS system now.
You can find ownership very easily, as you know.
Yeah.
That's
Okay. So it sounds like to me that we're all we're encouraging Russ to continue what he's doing.
yes.
And I want to thank him for kind of initiating this because I think it's going to be a good addition to what constitutes the historic district and gives people another way of looking and kind of understanding the fabric of the district more completely.
Yep.
So John, I think the next step is to really nail down the boundary, and then and then from that point, determine who actually draws that line, whether the town draws that line, if there's a town engineer, or if the MapGeo folks do that as part of their service.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right, so I will make sure you get the booklet that I have. It's a big pamphlet, it's not a little booklet, but it's a 12 by 18 kind of, with on fancy paper and so forth.
Right.
Good. Are there any other input into this process? Okay. The secretary's report, Martha.
Yes, as far as our open and active projects go in the historic district, 38 Lime Street, which is the little house that's up on stilts and things right now, they're still working on that. The library is coming along with their renovation project. They have asked to be on the agenda in December to talk about the Gilborough sculpture, which has now been temporarily put in the front garden there. The shed for 97 Lime Street has not been started yet. Looks like they have some kind of temporary shelter out there. The dumpster is gone, but there's another temporary thing there. And 61 Lime Street, the new windows, that's all set. So we can cross that off the list. So we really still have 3 active projects in the historic district. And the Nantucket Like for Like form, I'm still working on preparing a draft of a pre-application form on Mary Dunn's advice. She did not think we should include the like for like information in the C of A, except maybe as just a little checkoff, because she didn't want to have property owners feel that they would have to fill out that form and get approval every time they wanted to do something. But a pre-application form could be useful because many times property owners in the historic district are not sure if their project requires approval or not. So it looks like that would be a good way to go forward with that. And that could be just a very simple form. We ask people to come before us or just let us know whatever they're planning to do anyway. So this would formalize that a little bit. So I'll have that ready for the December meeting. And I'll be sending copies out to everybody. So.
There's an issue that I would like, not for today, but perhaps for next. We have general construction. We have general in our handbook. We talk about the drawings we like to see and so forth. And I believe I'd like to talk about as the commission whether we're being specific enough with larger projects versus smaller projects. And so, Martha, if you could put that on the agenda, and I'll have some specific comments and concerns.
Okay.
Because I think historically, most of our larger projects, people have had architects and architectural drawings for us to look at. And that's been very helpful. I'm thinking about the library. the kind of projects that the Congregational Church has done. I mean, the building projects the Congregational Church has done. And I just want to make sure that our language on that is clear, or if we need to strengthen it a bit.
And I'd just like to make another plea for finding those handbooks. Martha, you and I have to find
Oh,
the
yeah.
handbooks. Okay,
Are they lost?
I know they're in the town hall somewhere.
they're somewhere. We just haven't found them yet.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll be there. I'll
Well,
be
you
down
know,
there on Friday, so
Okay.
I'll take a look when I'm there.
Now, if you need to buy any special masks or PPE in order to do this, Martha, feel free to.
Thank you. I have plenty.
But I just was wondering, if you're going to go in looking in dusty corners, you might want to have a robe on, or one of those breathing, or one of those
A respirator.
Vaseline masks. Yes.
I've already looked once.
Not
And
that bad
I've
down there.
looked and failed. I'm sure Martha will find them instantly.
Okay.
I have a picture in my mind of exactly where they're located, so
All right.
I'll
I
look,
think part
I'll
of the
look there
problem is
first.
that the new Michelle doesn't know the crooks and crannies
Right.
she got. Okay. I think that gets us to the item, any new or old business. And John, you wanted to talk about the First Congregational Church. John Noyes?
I believe you're muted, John.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, this relates also to the September minutes, but there's a little bit of background. The fundamental issue is what authority we have under state statute to regulate signs. At the last meetings, folks suggested that I contact Mary Dunn, and I have done that. Martha's been copied on the her replies. She started off with a couple of comments that I think we all agree on, which is we have no business regulating or purporting to regulate content of signs, number one. And number two, our main concern is with permanent signs that have been there over 30 days. After that, I guess I would say I still have questions. The basic question I posed to Martha was, what is our authority over signs? Providing her with some specific questions. She came back quoting a statute that simply defines structures, and structures encompass signs. My concern is that statutory provision she quoted says absolutely nothing about what authority we have over structures or over components of structures such as signs. When you do go to the provision that talks about our authority, there are limits. We don't have authority to do anything we want in the historic district. For example, the statute that specifies what our authority is says we have no authority over colors. We've acknowledged that for a long time. It also says that we have authority over the style, the material, the size, and the location of outdoor advertising signs and bill posters. It seems to me, and this is the question that I've asked Mary Dunn that has not been answered, that's a limit on our authority. I do not see anywhere that we have authority over social justice signs, for example. the town zoning regulations, which give us immediate authority, specifically refer to this state statute. In any event, the town could not give us more authority than we have pursuant to the state statute. So how does this relate to the September minutes? There's a line in the September minutes that says, and Martha, you've, I'm sure, got the text, but the exact text that says we must approve the signs or permanent signs at the First Congregational Church. Since they're not advertising signs, my question is, do we have the authority to do that? We fortunately or unfortunately cannot exceed our authority.
Right. Well, when
I
look
would
at
suggest that we take out the phrase that says we must regulate those signs, or hold off again on the September minutes until we have clarification. I don't know that Mary Dunn is an attorney, if she's not sure how to construe the statute, I guess the next step would be to go to the town attorney. But I did want to try to get an answer from Mary first.
John, what, so would that, your understanding of that also apply to anybody along who, in the historic district, who took it upon themselves to build a sign in their front yard and say anything they wanted to say?
Correct.
So
Correct.
in your, what you are questioning is whether this commission has any authority over that.
Correct.
Hmm.
And our current.
Are you saying the authority over how the sign is built, or in terms of what the sign says?
In terms of how it's built, as I read this, we have authority over the style, the material, the size, and the location only of advertising signs and bill posters. I mean, that's what the statute says. Mary also said that, the fact that we're not an elected commission says nothing about our ability to rule on things within our purview. I agree with that. My speculation is that the statute may have been drafted to give us limited authority because any regulation of, let's say, a social justice sign or an opinion sign is likely controversial, and it may have been, and this is just my speculation, it may have been that when the statute providing authority for historic district commissions was debated in the legislature, that they thought any regulation of those opinion or social justice signs should be left to an elected body. I don't know why the limitation is in there, but it's in there.
Well, let me
so what
say,
you're saying is because. Go ahead.
I think to me the next step, I mean, and particularly in terms of that Mary Dunn is not a lawyer.
I don't know if she is. I don't know if she is or not.
Right, but I think talking to the town attorney would be very important.
I'm happy to pursue that. Do you know who the town attorney is, or how I get in touch with him or her?
Well, he is the managing partner of Sussman, of the law firm in New London. His name is Jack Collins, Collins, and he's a resident of Old Lyme.
Okay.
And And you guys, I'm sure either one of the Michelles will have his telephone number. And by the way, we've all worked with him at one time or another, and so he's very approachable.
My other minor suggestion for the minutes, and I'm coming back, John, to your last comment. The draft minutes have it down that I was the one to suggest going to the town attorney. I believe it was Tim Griswold. So
Okay.
do I need any further okay from Tim Griswold, or is it fine?
I just think if you go to Jack and you explain that Tim made the suggestion, and then he can, he knows where he can spend his time and everything. I've never, he's well enough respected that he basically, if he thought he needed to touch base with him, he would.
Okay.
But that should be left up to him.
So
whenever I've called him directly, and have not kept either Bonnie or Tim, specifically informed or asking him to make the initial call.
Okay. Well, let me contact him.
Okay.
The question is whether you want to wait to approve the September minutes until this is clarified, or whether you want to. I'm just reluctant to approve minutes that put on public record that we're asserting authority we don't have.
Why don't we wait? I would, unless someone else has. My initial reaction is to agree with your recommendation, and we can. This is not something where something is waiting for us to approve these minutes.
Right.
Therefore, we can let nature take its course.
Yeah, we can do that in December.
Yeah. Gosh, this is right. We're already in November.
I know. Yep.
Are there any other comments, general or specific, that anyone else would like to make?
Are we back to
about
it? Go ahead, Joe.
I'm sorry, about this issue or about other issues?
Just in general, because it seems like we've got a course of action for this issue.
Yes, okay. Carolyn, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't know if you're going to mention or discuss at this meeting anything about the historical societies then and now calendar. Is that on our agenda for today?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah.
I have one comment, since it's so prominent on the photograph that I saw, that we really don't know anything much yet about the date at which the present building we know as the Bee and Thistle was built. And this says, I think it gives a specific date of 1796. It's quite prominently given. I think the building may have been built in 1785. And
it says 1756, actually.
1756? I think that's so speculative at this point, because the Landmarks of Old Lyme booklet says sometime between 1756 and 1790, that it would be perhaps, in the interest of the best accuracy we can come up with, not wise to make that statement of the date. But that's a small point. I didn't know if this is where we need to raise those things or not.
Well, since we're still talking about a date, can we just use circa?
Circa 1756, if it was built in...
No, it's circa mid 1700s. Just that gives us a range while we're sorting out the actual time.
Right, except that it could be 1790. So that my point is that the range is so broad in this particular case. And I know Martha hasn't done the research, nor have I, although I've been working on it recently.
We don't really have to have a date there if that's the case.
Yes, I don't know, whatever you want to do. I just want to raise the question.
It's a great question.
But could we say was built in the 1700s?
I think that's too broad. I mean, it clearly wasn't built in 1710.
Well,
Late 1700s.
or say in the mid to late 1700s. The problem is that that's not all going to fit on one line.
Yeah.
My feeling, given this conversation, my feeling would be to leave the date off of that one. Whenever we have a question like this, because we have a methodology for arriving at that answer, but it's not useful for us to be known as, rough, using a broad estimate. Is this already gone to press, Martha?
I will check with Jim about that.
Okay.
Last year, we had several corrections. I mean, they sent it to us so that we could sign off on it. So hopefully it has not gone to press.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I'll find out from him.
Okay. Speaking personally, I like the idea of having the old picture and the new picture. I thought it was a very clever idea. And it communicates a lot of information. One of the things it communicates is the stability of some of these older buildings to keep their original shape.
One thing that's interesting, John, just while we're commenting, is that there are several copies of a much earlier photograph that show the Bee and Thistle before the Gamble roof and before it was moved back from the street, which was actually quite recent.
Is that right?
It's true.
Now you've answered the picture on the left. Does that really show a Gamble roof, or is that?
I don't have it on the screen, so I can't check.
Okay. Because when I looked at the picture on the left, I said, how come the Gamble roof doesn't blare forth? And maybe if it originally did not have a Gamble roof, I didn't know that.
I think it was moved back. We do have the date, and we do know for sure.
I know when it was moved back, but I didn't realize that they had changed the roof at that time. Okay. Yeah, because the basement structure of that building is not original. It was modified when they moved it back.
Yeah, I'm not
Anything
surprised.
else? I'm sorry.
No, I just said I'm not surprised at that. They moved it quite a significant distance, so that makes sense.
Do we have time for a 2-minute discussion of one other issue?
Not always.
I wonder if we want to put on the agenda for a future meeting an idea that was briefly raised last meeting, which is exploring whether to expand the historic district. This came up, I think, in conjunction with our discussion of the sidewalk along Ferry Road, which has a number of historic houses. I know there was sensitivity at the time the original historic district was established, but a couple things have changed. One is the adventure with the proposed train, and a historic district helps should that issue arise again. The other is years of, I would say, responsible experience with the historic district, and folks now may appreciate that houses in the historic district do take on particular significance and perhaps some extra value, and maybe folks would be interested in at least exploring. By folks, I mean folks along Ferry Road, say, be interested in exploring what an extension of the historic district might mean. So if it's just me, forget it. But if other people are curious, maybe it's something we could talk about at an upcoming meeting.
I think it's an interesting idea. I think that you might find there's more objection to it than you might think. Just because I live kind of right in the center of everything, I hear people, my neighbors, many of my neighbors, who are so thrilled that they're outside of the historic district supervision. They consider it like they're lucky that they live in town, but they don't have the onerous HDC on their back. So, you know, I don't know. I think it would require selling it.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Yeah.
But again, I just raised the question. Deanie, you're, as you say, closer to the ground on this than I am.
Certainly it would help. I know from the experience during all of our work on the train that having these kinds of designations is a very significant obstruction to having federal projects roll through. So there's some benefits for it, but there are people who don't like to be told what they can and can't do. So.
Well, I know one couple that exited and then built at McCurdy Road, just for that thing. But I just think I would say first is let me just I'll forget the polemics for a second. I like John's recommendation that we have a thorough discussion at our next meeting. And the meeting may take the form of a couple of discussions, but I think that would be very important. And one of the reasons I think is I am very impressed when I look at the 5 structures that were chosen for the May 2021 calendar, just how those 5 buildings have retained their original look and feel. I mean, clearly there are people that are complaining about this, but there are also people that are dedicated to it.
Yeah.
And I look at the Baptist Church, for example, which is now a home, but the look and feel of the church still remains, and that's a remarkable thing.
It also is the case that you're not precluded from doing major things. I mean,
it's true.
My house is half of it's brand new. I, for one, was very glad to have input from the HDC to help ensure that the new part was in keeping with the old part of the house. There's useful feedback to that. But
that's very true, and people don't understand how little oversight we actually have. And if we were to pursue this further, we'd have to make sure people understand that.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But we could give examples of
one other thing would be interesting is if now that if we said. And one of the things I'm going to put on the table when we have I won't announce this until we have our meeting, but there is an idea that could let us expand without forcing us into these long drawn out fights if we take whole parts of roads. But I won't say any more about it until we have our meeting.
Okay. Good.
But Martha, these 5 pictures that you've chosen for the May 2021 are really very powerful. 5 sets of pictures. Thank you.
Oh, I didn't have anything to do with that. Actually, Jim did that.
Okay. Well,
I'll let him know that we like them.
Are there more? Are there more of these? Or are these the only 5 we have good photographs in both eras?
I don't know. We don't actually have the photographs. The Historical Society has them in their archive.
The Florist also has in their archive. So There's a big historical photo collection at the Flo Gris.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I guess, Carolyn, maybe what I'm wondering is, I don't want to go overboard, but if there's another 5, other structures that we can have similar photographs, I think it begins to give a feeling of what we're trying to do visually, and how we've been successful.
I think that's right, John.
And so if we could, this is kind of like another variation of the plaque program without being plaques, but I mean, of providing context for people to understand what we're doing and the impact it has. Thank you, Carolyn, excuse me.
Yeah, but you don't mean to add to the calendar. You just mean so that we could have in our own minds these, copies of
That's
these
right.
photographs.
That's right. If we took what's available and put it in a montage like we have here, so that we as the keepers of the flame for the historic district, we had this, and this would give us a good feeling for what we're trying to do and our degree of success.
One other way to start is that I think the then and now calendars have used early photographs over the past, several years. So perhaps we could ask them to provide us with their, the photographs they've used, and then I could see what's already available and add to it from there. How would that be?
That would be terrific.
Sounds great.
Okay, Martha, can you work with Carolyn to kind of execute this?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, terrific. Are there anything else that we ought to talk about?
I want to say
Any
one
other
thing.
questions?
Can I say one last very quick comment? I thought the write-up that Russ Todd provided as a sample for how we might write up descriptions about buildings was excellent.
Oh, thank you, Carolyn.
I second that.
Very nice. Yes.
Russ, there was another point you were making with this. This is outside the 300 feet, but it adds to the ambiance within the 300 feet.
No, actually, this particular building is within the 300 feet.
It is, okay.
There is and I think you in our call, John, you had a very good point that there are auxiliary buildings on historic district properties that are outside the zone that might also add to the character. And
Yes.
I guess the question is, should we document those buildings as well or not?
Well, my recommendation would be that we do when we think it's significant. We don't go overboard, but we make sure that, because when you're driving down the street, you see these buildings adding to kind of the depth of the historic district. But we don't make a big deal out of it. Just if there's one that's particularly distinctive, and we can include, and it's just part of the fabric. I'll give you an example. The couple next to us have just built. Now this is new, but they built in back of their property, and it conforms to all the rules that we have. A barn, and it's probably 350 feet back, but it adds kind of texture and cohesiveness to their entire property. And they came to us and they worked with us. They had a proposal and they listened to what we said, and it worked out very well. So what I'm doing is, Russ, is saying I would encourage wherever it's appropriate, but I don't think we need to be slavish about it.
Okay.
Because what you're putting together is just going to be another very, it's kind of, we did it with signs, we're doing it with these photographs, we're doing it with what you're doing. That's going to provide more texture and everything and understanding of what makes a historic district click.
If Great, John. If there's any comments or feedback or things that should be added to this kind of format for and I think, John, that was your intent in sharing this, but if there's any comments or things that should be added to this format for the auxiliary buildings, please share, and we'll use that as a template, if you will, for collecting information.
Caroline, when you wrote the feel of the place, was that the name of the article or the
Charm of the
booklet?
place.
What?
The charm of the place.
The charm of the place.
Mm-hmm.
If out of that research, there may be some piece of data or maybe if there's information there you think that would be useful as Russ puts this together, I'm just encouraging you to kind of bring that information forward.
Okay, sure. Are you, it's also interesting just for context and also, for the whole contextualized history of the district to think about what historic outbuildings are no longer there. I don't know if there's any room for that in anything you're doing or that we would want to do in the future, but it is interesting. Let's say, for example, the horse sheds behind the First Congregational Church that burned in 1907. We have photographs that include those, and it's just interesting to see what it looked like before the fire. That's just one example. There was a blacksmith shop on Academy Lane, those kinds of things. So just help us to think back and understand the context of an earlier period.
Well, I think anything like that is helpful. So if there are photographs of the horse sheds, it's hard for us to imagine what it was like when everyone drove a carriage or rode horses to church.
And in 1907, not so very far back in time.
Right.
I think anything John, I was going to say is anything to help understand the original use of the buildings, which the historic buildings, if they're not there, photos and information about that might inform about existing buildings that still exist. So
right.
It's all helpful. Yeah.
Well, I know, for example, in our property, our little house, we have a huge, thick walls to the basement. And someone finally came up with the idea that originally this was a field behind our house, and they wanted to be able to bring the hay up and dump it into another wagon or bring it, and so that required, a platform that was raised about 3 or 4 feet, and the foundation of our house was literally the foundation for that platform.
Hmm.
And the quirky things like that contribute to the texture of the place. By the way, you can tell that story, Russ.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But that, by the way, that was confirmed by Ned Pfeiffer, the archaeologist that has done some work for us. Well, do I hear a motion to conclude our meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Aye. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, and we'll see you in a month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Russ?
Yes.
Are you calling from home or from work?
I'm at home at the moment. Yeah.
Do you mind if when I go out, I can go out and get the bulletin and bring it right up to you?
Oh, that would be great.
Okay.
I'm here. Yes.
Do you want me to come to the front door or the side door?
Whichever is most comfortable for you.